31 on the 15th of May. We're hopefully having better audio this week. No acoustic feedback. Let us know if we have. I'm Doug Splinter.
I'm Todd Kidda. Welcome to Office Flash Friday.
Yeah, I got a bunch of stuff. We're going to postpone demo part 3 of the provisioning stuff until next week because a whole bunch of kind of more urgent content came out while the other one's cool. It's not near as important from a timeliness standpoint as some of the other stuff we're going to cover this week. So I decided to do that one thoroughly and well next week rather than try and smash it in and go too quick. Or I'll record a supplemental video or something and release it to our channel. But anyway, so we're not going to do that. I have a bunch of security announcements, some know your data, some data classification announcements, team stuff, some new app templates, a bunch of stuff. Basically, the security stuff's more top of mind and I think relevant right now. So that's why I chose to push it off and not try and talk faster than I normally
security. Do. I think I know the security one you're talking about. It's very cool. So I can't wait.
Yeah. There's a bunch of stuff there. So what do you got going on this week?
I have a small smattering of things. So if that makes sense. So I'll just jump right into it. So I thought this was worth calling out. This isn't necessarily a new feature, but it's a new starter kit around the we're calling it an AI builder starter kit. But it's really a Power Platform starter kit that's using Power Automate, Power Apps, AI Builder, and to do an invoice processing solution. So you may or may not have an invoice processing solution you need to implement, but everyone has invoices, and I thought this was really great. And CDS is also using. So if nothing else, I think this is a really good example of an end-to-end solution, right? Architecture that's using no code all the way through end-to-end with AI using citizen developer tools. That's really actually very powerful. I thought this was pretty cool. So like I said, if nothing else, it's worth cracking open and looking at to see the power of what you can actually build with these things. And I really do love the extensive use of the Common Data Service, right? That's this purple guy here looking at Power Automate. And that's also where you're going to find all the AI builder stuff that's actually doing forms recognizer, right? So the scenario is like, you get an invoice and email, you parse it out, and then you do forms recognizer to parse out all the fields and run through a process. I'm pretty impressed with the capabilities here. It's just funny thinking, like, I would love to show this to, someone who used Access to build similar solutions like 20 years ago. Say, look what we can do now, right? Especially the folks in IT, right? Who, want to put governance around this stuff in ALM, which I'm also going to talk about here in a second. This is insanely cool. That's all. I'm really happy to see the progress we've made on the platform. So speaking of ALM and progress and moving from, the actual cool solution to the management of cool solution, we've consolidated and delivered, I think, some really good documentation around ALM or application lifecycle management on the Power Platform. This isn't necessarily new content or new ideas, but it's bringing it together. I think to date, there's been people doing lifecycle management in Power Apps and Power Automate and environments and those kinds of things, but the content was kind of smattered around, and I felt like the people that really had done it, kind of had some tribal knowledge kind of there. So putting this in documentation and getting this from beginner to advanced, I think is really good. Even starting from like, what is ALM, right? What does that mean? And what?
Oh, I think that's important for the citizen development audience to understand the context of what is this? Why is this important? Because we're really taking people, and a customer once said to me that the citizen developer definition can go from real citizens who vote all the way up to constitutional scholars.
Love it.
Right?
Yeah.
That they were like, so citizen development as a definition has a very broad continuum. And so if you're new to public service, so to speak, right, in the citizenry, you can kind of get going on top of this. If you're very experienced, and you like to run voting processes and all that kind of stuff, the goal is no hanging chads, right?
Wow, we really took this one all the way through. Yeah, this is good. I love this.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, that's good. And you have to be of a certain age to even know what that reference is, I guess. That's pretty good. And really, I like this too, because moving from unmanaged to managed, because, whether I'm talking to a customer about, apps or BI solutions in Power BI or whatever it is, the idea is when you're enabling citizens, right, to do citizen development, they're not going to start with lifecycle management in the back of their head. They're starting with solving their problem, as they should.
That's right.
Right.
As you should. Yep.
But you need this. There's a moment, right, where you need to say, okay, this is an actual solution that's running our business. Let's grow it up. Right. It's reached adolescence. Let's teach it about the real world. Now, here's another weird analogy I'm making.
I'll tell the story for the one we put out there, the story platform that we use in the MTCs, right? That has grown up to the point. It's got a series of flows. There's multiple custodians. It's being more broadly adopted. It's about to go worldwide. Like I built this original thing and we showed the code, the SharePoint news generation, where you submit this little simple application. It generates SharePoint news and syndicates it. And so now people are like, oh, well, we want to upscale this and add fields and data and integrated into more business units, and we're like, it was just this little thing that we.
Well, and the thing about that is you built it in your basement, right?
Yeah.
With the you hacked it together, right? You did a little more than hack it, right? But I mean, you weren't thinking dev, test, prod, unit testing and smoke tests and all that. That's not what you were thinking, right? And nor should it have been. You were thinking about solving your problem, right?
Yeah.
So I love that.
Yeah, but now I am sort of growing up into this and seeing how I can participate, because I do have, much as I joke about writing Doug code, I do have a serious developer persona. I used to haul out on speech development, right? Back in speech server days and the rest of those kind of things. But that I'm used to being in Visual Studio and with all these other, and like I've been messing around more lately with GitHub because I never really used Git, and I actually went back to basics on that one, and I watched all the lessons on Git. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like forget Hub. Let's talk about Git. So I went through all the lessons on Git to make sure I didn't have any Swiss cheese knowledge, right? Yeah. And like for me, the pull thing is backwards in the way I think about things.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But so I kind of like, okay, I kind of was using all these terms. I felt like I had too much Swiss cheese knowledge. So I went and solidified Git. And now I'm like, okay, now these things in GitHub make more sense.
And really, you tell me if I'm wrong. I bet that didn't take you more than an hour or two, probably, right?
No, I didn't. It was, maybe, you're right. It was a couple hours, like they're little 15, 20-minute bite-sized chunks that explain certain components to me. And you can just get to use something without understanding it. And I felt like that's where I was.
Well, and Doug, here's my anecdotal observation. I think even your most seasoned software developers don't completely understand all the Git features, right? Like there's some really advanced things, but I mean the 90% of what you need is like add, pull, commit.
Yeah. You know what struck me about this and about that whole ecosystem, including this, is that it really is just enterprise content management. And I grew up in enterprise content management. For those who remember like PC Docs and Docs Open and Open Text and all those things, like that was the start of my career, was document management in the legal industry. And then I learned security through e-discovery and forensic preservation. So I came into this from a content management and preservation and investigation standpoint. And content generation. It's why I love Visual Basic for applications and the Power Platform, because I like automation and generation and making things easy. Yeah. And so, but then again, you're right. You grow up and you hit these things. This is why we're hammering on this. It's super important, and you should understand and embrace it.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I can imagine if you're building like a COE for Power Platform in your organization, you should probably think about creating an offering for your users. It's kind of like maybe in the form of a workshop where it's like, okay, so you've built an app and it's become popular and usable. Like now what? How do we grow that up and wrap ALM around it, right? Like give it a hug of ALM, right? Or as Donovan Brown used to say, rub a little DevOps on it. So
I know he is so amazing.
Yeah, he's incredible. Yeah. So all right. So I think that was some good conversation, really driving home the point around ALM on these things. The tools are there. So I mean, if there's any question, right, and you guys are rolling out Power Platform, can you govern it? Of course, there's things around like DLP and those kinds of things, but then can you put lifecycle management around your app? The answer is yes. Okay. The answer is absolutely 100% yes. This is not another access tool, right? Where there's no governance. So, the next two I have are a little more, outside of my wheelhouse, usually from the data and Power Platform perspective, but I want to call this one out from a personal perspective. I was really excited to see that we're launching the Family Safety app on iOS and Android. So if you don't have kids, you probably don't care about this. Doug knows I have more than a couple. And we make extensive use of the family features in Windows. For years now, every one of my kids have had a Windows account, a Microsoft account. They log into Windows with. They have their pins set, and especially for the younger ones, we'll have like screen time and restrictions on websites and apps and those kinds of things. And I'll get like this little thing in my inbox every week that says here's the searches they did and all kinds of things. And now we're kind of so. And by the way, like I think that platform is fairly mature at this point, and it just works, right? It's fantastic. And you can't. I mean, I'll be honest. Like I think there's a lot of great use for things like iPads and those kinds of things. There's nothing like this on like iPad for Win. I think that's a big selling point of Windows devices, the multi-account and those kinds of things. But we launched the family safety apps for iOS and Android, where some of those same features are accessible. You can set the screen time use, look at the balance, and give people more rights and content ages. And by the way, this goes to Xbox as well. So every one of my kids logs into Xbox account with their PIN on that as well. And of course, things like where are people at and those kinds of things. So I think this is pretty cool. Well, I'll be interested to see where this goes.
Don't blow past that cross-platform "where are people at" thing. That is a big deal.
Yeah. Totally.
Because if you're in a single ecosystem or the single vendor or whatever it is, but these ones, and there are some third-party applications out there, but a lot of them are a little more invasive and they market to you all the time.
Yeah. And I was going to say, like some of these things, I was going to say, you think about. And it's hard for me as the Microsoft guy to talk about trust in Microsoft, but I legitimately, as a consumer, trust Microsoft with my consumer data more than I do maybe other companies, right? Even whether those are big companies or small companies, I think any more like trust in your data is going to be a selling point.
I agree with that, but don't you think that's because we learned some hard lessons?
A little bit, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the history of the company we learned some very important lessons, and that starts from the top with our president Brad and Satya from our CEO, who talk about, and every year we go through this mandatory trust and customer data custodianship. So there's a lot of that there. All right, cool. Right. Well, anyway, I just like this feature really caught my eye as a way to go cross-platform with visibility without some third-party service whose privacy terms are less clear.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, this one is a little more on the consumer side, but, when you go back to the mission statement of Microsoft to enable every organization and individual to achieve more, I think this is in that bucket. And we're all the whole person, right? So if we have kids, right, this is relevant. This one, Doug kind of yelled at me a little bit because he's like, hey, you stole my Teams content. But so I apologize for that. But I'm also a keyboard. I feel like I'm a keyboard.
This is more you than me. I admit.
Yeah. Okay, all right, fair enough.
Yeah, I do.
And I think it's just time to, and nothing to announce here, but this is just more like, hey, everyone's in Teams probably, if you're using Teams, probably in Teams more than you've ever been. And that's probably not going to change anytime soon. So like become a keyboard person. I think keyboard shortcuts and keyboard things have just made people more productive. And I think some people feel like, well, I'm a mouse person, I'm a keyboard person, but like it doesn't take a lot to become a keyboard person.
If you learn one keyboard shortcut, learn the mute.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that's absolutely the one you have to know. It's not sexy, it's not but you need good mute. I heard someone say mute hygiene, right? You need good mute hygiene and camera hygiene. So if you're not muting yourself and you're making lots of noise, then you're actually, it's kind of rude, right? So yeah. So I do have to say I'm going to give some criticism here a little bit, because Control-Shift-M is the keyboard shortcut, but Teams has to be focused for that to work, and it drives me absolutely batty, right? So you just have to get, again, that's part of the Teams mute hygiene, where you just kind of have to get used to the fact that you have to focus Teams, Control-Shift-M, and that's kind of how it works. I think even like Skype for Business had a global shortcut, but I won't harp on that too much. But here's some other ones that I love that I'm going to show off here real quick. This one's pretty meta. It's Control plus period. Actually brings up the keyboard shortcuts, so that's pretty cool. So just remember Control period. That could be the last keyboard shortcut you have to remember for Teams, because then it just brings up all the rest of them. Control E. I found that like resorting to search has become a really great user interface for apps these days. I use it in Visual Studio Code. I use it in the Azure portal. I use it in Teams all the time. So, and this is search for whatever. It could be a message, a person, a team. So if you hit Control E, your cursor is going to go directly to the search box at the top of the screen, and you can start typing. This one is actually one I didn't know about until today, and I'm going to use the heck out of it going forward because I don't know about you, but I'm in a lot of teams, and sometimes like I'll get a link and it'll crash me to a channel, and I don't know where I am, right? Or
Yeah,
or I
like
know
the left side, it doesn't shift your context in the Navi.
Correct.
Right.
And I want to go to like the top level channel or something, and I'm like, well, how do I get there? So Control G is a go-to, right? A go-to, a team or a channel, which is great. So I'm definitely going to use the heck out of that one. I already talked about mute. These last two are really, really cool. And I wish I would have had maybe a chat ready to show. I don't want to invade on anyone's privacy inside of Microsoft, so I'm not going to hop over to Teams and show you this. But if you're a console user, you know that the up arrow shows you your last command, right? So if you do a dir in Windows and you hit enter and you hit up, it'll bring up your dir again, right? So we've brought that kind of functionality into Teams. Like, so if I were to send a message to Doug and I made a typo or I wanted to add something to it, I could hit the up arrow and it'll immediately take me into edit mode for that last message. So
assuming editing is enabled in your organization and in that channel.
Yes. So I think this is the only one that maybe, probably might not work for everybody at this point. Because
Yep.
I think maybe that's an inside feature that we have. I'm not sure, but I think Doug, you just kind of alluded to that.
No, I'm just saying that you edit messages is a thing you can allow or disallow.
Got it. Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
And I know that's really new too. So that just kind of, mileage may vary if that's enabled for you. This one is really cool. Not everyone knows about this yet. This was added in like maybe the last or last before last version of Windows. So this is a Windows feature. So anywhere in Windows you're typing, you can hit Windows plus period, and you get this emoji picker. And so this is really cool. So like if I type, laughing, like laugh, it's gonna start typing here, but it's also gonna show me the oh, look, and there's a laundry emoji. Who knew, right? It's going to give me the emojis for that thing that I'm typing. So if I type like heart, right, it's going to bring me that. So this is really cool because, I communicate a lot with emojis, whether on text messaging or even in Teams. So I thought that was a really cool. Windows plus.
Have you seen how Teams often have those really little cosmetic like looking names to them where people put emojis and all the rest of the stuff in it? If you ever wonder if people are that good at their emojis, they're not. They just use this. And then of course there's the Kaimojis. Yep.
So look at that. There you go. So super fun. I think for a while, like emojis several years back were kind of like cute and whatever, but I think they add a lot to a conversation, especially when you can't be with somebody in person. So anyway, that's all I got, Doug. I'd love to hand it back over to you.
Okay, cool. So I'm gonna dive in on. Well, I got a whole bunch of stuff. So let me shift over. So see if I get it back where I'm not quite so zoomed in. There we go, on top of it. So we're going to go quick because we had some good discussions, but these ones are pretty easy to go through. They talked about how to use some Teams apps during stand-up, which I thought were pretty good. So leveraging Poly, Scrum Genius, and doing some board integration into things, which I thought was a pretty cool highlight this week from the Teams team. And then there is another app template. And we're going to schedule some hackathons for app templates, just as a virtual hackathons, people to do some of these things, because I keep pushing these things and they are crazy interesting on top of it. So the customer feedback one actually is a Teams app template where you can go ahead and basically, get customer feedback on certain things. And then they have like the sample applications as to what those customer, feedbacks are on things and everything else. So it's really cool. It says, this is an interesting one, that the app draws inspiration from the Nightly Notes app used in Microsoft's retail stores to use to capture customer feedback and sentiment. So this gives this from the field view back to the store, like what happened today? What did customers say today? So you get this real frontline to backline direct communications channel from associates in the store. But think about the number of times you have a customer service rep where there's an interesting moment where they could capture. And maybe you have a contact center or whatever it is, but you have people on the floor who need that direct, fast feedback channel. Because you built this on top of Teams, you have this complete flexibility to customize this one. So again, app template, amazingness number 15, from Icebreaker to all the other ones that we show on the Corp Comms ones, amazing stuff on top of the Teams app templates. So go check them out.
That's cool.
All right, we're going to shift over to security. And the rest of it's going to be security and I guess more security and governance, and that's what we're going to cover on top of it. So Microsoft open sourced our COVID-19 threat assessment. Now, the article, if you check it out, is focused a little bit on, at the beginning, on Sentinel integration. What we're talking about is, here's all the ways people are trying our intelligence on how people are, the signals of threat that are currently being leveraged within the attack community that you can go look for when doing threat hunting. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think so.
So then you can access them directly from Sentinel by simply putting in the integration for pulling those things in directly from the GitHub repo where we put it. So if you see right here, it's feed Microsoft COVID-19 indicators. So this is the threat indicators. And then you're going to join those against Sentinel. So essentially we're doing the database merge of all those signals into the signal integration on top of it. And then you get the advantage of that. So then you can do hunting queries and everything else to see whether or not those things, and do advanced hunting on top of those threat indicators. And so they have this whole thing on how to use that to do threat hunting against common current attack vectors through the advanced hunting frameworks and all that stuff on top of it. And they talk about how to get MISP integration to Sentinel through the GitHub repo and how to do that, and that you have the ability to grab those indicators for other threat platforms as well. So while we've said, hey, here's how you use it for things on top of it. And so there's an example of phishing campaigns, right? So they have someone who's doing out, with cure and vaccine, right? And there's a malicious GZ file on top of it. And so then if you run the framework against it, you can say, hey, here's, the different things that you could block or hunt in regards to those different things, malicious Excel macro files. So I got a bunch of examples of current kind of threat prevention or hunting this can result in. So an amazing amount of sharing, because honestly, we could have just said, oh, this is, we're going to keep it to Microsoft, and if you own Sentinel, you own this. But they didn't do that. They put it on GitHub, and anyone who can take that essentially hash payload in for analytic can take advantage of this data.
I just love how it's like interjoined with this data from GitHub. I just love that. That's so cool.
Right? Yeah. I mean, it's just, I don't know. Like, it's one of those ones where you and I who are data people on top of it. Now, the other one, and I'm going to do a brief show on this one, is we released this end user security awareness tool analytic specifically targeted around COVID. Did you see this? The cybersecurity awareness kit?
No, I did not.
So it comes with a whole bunch of assets about beware of cyber scams, like posters, and they actually released training videos that you can go download. So when you download this kit, it has the URL and everything is out there. But if you come out, you also get like all these different infographics, the actual training videos, so you could import them into Stream or whatever your learning tool is on top of it, your mass phishing training, documentation, like content, fraud posters and newsletters. So everything designed to educate your employees around these various assets that we have. So it's a really cool integrated service on top of it. If you hit that landing zone and sign in, you actually go to this attack simulator training area, and then you can go look at protecting your home computer, privacy training. If you hit one of those, it'll pop up, and so you can see the content. So it's a nice release of interesting content that you can use to educate your users on current threat states and indicators.
It looks like you could customize how you roll that out, right? I mean,
yeah,
like
you can. Here's all the raw content. Here's an expression of that content. Right. You could deploy it into, a combination of SharePoint and Stream sites, or you could deploy it into Teams through a Stream channel. You could use flows to syndicate it into different team channels. You could use the Corp Comms app template in order to syndicate it out to people where they live. So there's because this is all a platform, you can do amazing things with this or other related security content. So go check it out. I think it's really good stuff on top of it. I'm not given time. I'm not going to dive in too much on top of this, but have you seen the new release of all the secured core PCs? Have you seen those at all?
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
Right. So if you are watching around security, here's an example. Like, why do I care about this? Well, here's an example of ThunderSpy, which takes advantage of a hardware level memory exploit inside of the Thunderbolt stack, right? And so it basically uses a Flash admin functionality to overwrite controller frameworks in the Thunderbolt controller patcher, right? So these are firmware level exploits. It does require physical access for this task, right? So someone walks up, jacks in, and the crazy part is, no matter the strength of encryption, no matter what protocol you're going to do, because of where this thing lives inside of it, the computer can see that data, so they can actually do direct memory reads against those things because of the level how kernels work. Remember all of your old rings and everything else that goes into these things. But essentially, they talk about how secured core computers, because of their direct memory access protection, block these kind of things. And so there's a cool video on DMA attacks and everything else. So I guess what I'm saying is, as you look to your PC refreshes, you should start looking for this feature so you gain these additional memory controls and protections. And it's a pretty, I went out and said, all right, well, so here's the cool thing. How many computers are out there that have it? It's a pretty good list. So, a lot of current generation from us and our partners, and something to look forward to.
Nice.
Stepping away from security, there was some new features in To-Do. Did you catch those at all? Like the combined task view?
Gosh. That one, this is like, okay, finally, I can see all my tasks in one view.
Yeah, and updated today in week views and list printing and all the rest of that kind of stuff. So To-Do got a little love, and I missed it back on May 5th, but I thought that one was kind of a fun one to bring up though, like, on top of it.
Last week was Wunderlist went bye-bye. That was the last day.
I know.
I literally logged in. I'm like, oh, I guess I should, I don't really have anything super important in there in Wunderlist, but I logged in at like 5 to midnight. And imported my data into Do, and then it was gone. So,
well, I guess that's good. All right, next up on the hit parade. Next week is Build, right?
Yes.
But did you know about this? The Microsoft 365 Virtual Marathon.
Okay, when is that? May 27th?
All right, so this is So this is 27th and 28th, 36 hours over 2 days. Okay, and check all that out. Right. Project Cortex overview, latest innovations, keynote from Jeff Teeper, 365 live events with Lorena and Christina, design productivity apps with SharePoint lists and libraries, Power Apps, and Power Automate. Look at this list. Architecting the intranet. I'm like, that's a great list.
That's unbelievable, man. I cannot believe the amount of content that's being created and delivered globally in the last couple months. It's amazing.
Yeah, we were talking beforehand about Donovan Brown, who has amazing stuff that he does in the DevOps space. But he showed pictures of like getting ready for virtual build, his like home desk and lighting and skunkworks stuff that he's been doing.
Yeah,
it's crazy. That. So anyway, so I thought this one was a really cool call out. So if you're in the mood for 36 hours, if you can set aside the 27th to 28th, and you want to ramp on some stuff, man, oh man, go register for the virtual marathon. But it does actually look like a marathon.
It's like, I think it's an ultra marathon, 36 hours.
All right, so as we head into the home stretch here, I wanted to do a one reminder and then a call out to a new one. Now, if you will recall, we announced the GA of sensitivity labels with protection in SharePoint and OneDrive.
Okay.
Right? So we had the GA of sensitivity labels with protection for Office files and OneDrive. And that was a little while back, and you can show the impact. This is kind of some of the stuff we've shown different versions of it through over for a while, but now here it is in the SharePoint and OneDrive components, right? So on top of that, so here's the actual post around the whole different context around things and what it means and everything else. But we linked that into the general availability of Know Your Data, which hit this week. And the Know Your Data framework is interesting because this is the discovery and review capabilities within to understand the nature of your sensitive data. So what is your sensitive data type and content? How much is represented? So it's this nice, I used to sometimes have customers do phantom e-discovery search to understand the nature of what might be out there, right? So that you could do it. Now you could do DLP, but that's just going to lock it down at the time of scan. And then you get alerts. Now, there was audit only mode, but essentially there was no good exploratorium for that kind of stuff. And if you look up top, the preview for trainable classifiers and the rest of all that kind of stuff, so it's pretty cool. So you get this this content explorer, so you can kind of go out there and have that review of what's going on top of it, and you get to see the label change, label applied, label removed, so the activity around all that data classification framework on top of it. So obviously, my regulated industry customers are going to be like, oh.
I have to imagine there's a few people who are drooling at this point. That's amazing.
Yeah, this one's really cool. But remember, these are all kind of weld together because if you think about it, this one was about the GA of sensitivity labels with protection, so essentially the labeling. And this is about the discovery and the understanding of the context and use and maybe lack of labels or presence of labels or things that should have labels, and all that stuff comes in. So you can say, hey, locations where sensitivity labels are applied and locations where retention labels are applied. So you kind of get this sense of how are we doing and the top retention labels applied to content, top sensitivity labels applied to content. So you can go ahead and look at and explore and then understand what's the most sensitive information types used in the content, which hopefully also have sensitivity labels.
Very cool. I love it.
And then there's retention on top of it. So these are all the different things you have to get down in order to do it. Because remember, I mean, technically speaking, retention is a security construct, right? I mean, you should only keep things around as long as you need to and no longer. So so I thought these were, I kind of skimmed over the default label enough because we covered it back when it was in preview. I was like, oh, this happened. But I thought this one really does deserve a highlight because now these two interrelated components, the know your data and the other one are in GA.
Love it.
And I think at 11:01, that does it for me.
Cool.
Next week, I will return to the thing we've been doing for the contextual-based Power Apps with template-driven teams and the API integration. And we'll be breaking down how to create a trusted application endpoint and then invoke that from a SharePoint list to generate the Teams template. And then everybody knows or should know how to make a Power App to make an item in the SharePoint list. So we're not going to show the cosmetic app, but we will show the engine part of the flow where if you make this item in the SharePoint list, then boom, it's going to go template that team with the custom contextual applications. And as part of that, we're going to show not just the vanity metadata we've been doing, but the authoritative metadata in the back end. So if you choose to rename Project Falcon to Project Owl, we're not going to rely on the vanity in this one, right?
Right.
So
that's awesome.
Yes, that'll be fun next week. We'll show off that solution framework and jump back into it. Anything else from you, Mr. Kidda?
I got everything out already. I'm good. Thank you, though.
All right. Well, in that case, everybody have I hope everyone had a great, all the moms out there had a great Mother's Day last weekend. I hope everybody has a safe and productive weekend wherever you are.
A productive weekend, yes.
Well, I got landscaping and stuff to do,
Yeah.
so I'm hoping for a productive weekend. I'm hoping for good weather and the ability to get out and plant stuff, right? So that's kind of what I'm hoping for.
Lovely.
All right. Well, you all be good out there. We'll talk to you next week. Take care.
Cheers. Okay, I think